All right, where did we leave off? We left off with me giving you a way of classifying stage sets in two very simple ways. What I refer to as representational and presentational. Representational, the definition is obvious. This is a set that represents an identifiable location. The presentational is obviously the opposite of that. It is one that is a little more symbolic. It might be a little more abstract, but it's one that does not identify or establish an identifiable location. With a presentational play, what we're talking about is who is involved in what is going on is far more important than where it is going on. The set that's sitting behind me, albeit not finished, doesn't have the real furniture. I hope that that's being delivered today, and so forth. But even at this stage of the game, how would you classify it? As representational or presentational?
Representational.
Of course, representational. It represents an identifiable location, and that will be further clarified and made even more concrete once you see the show and you hear the dialogue referring to the location and the specifics of the location. But it is certainly representational. Where I want to move now, and before I get there, let me just diverge back to something I was talking about the other day. In regards to that handout that I gave you with the three images on there of the kind of work that a scenic designer does, it had a floor plan on it, had a front elevation on it, had a rear elevation on it. All right, these are just basic drawings. All right, what kind of drawing is that? Floor plan. Do you recognize it? Yeah, it's that thing behind me. If I can hold this with my chin. Down here you can see the proscenium arch, the apron of the stage. You can see the set. You can see the stage drapes drawn in. You see the doors, the foyer, and the arch in the back, and so on and so forth. And it's from this that we begin laying out the set that is behind me. Good Lord, it's like rolling up toilet paper. All right, what is this? Front elevation. Do you recognize it? Built as drawn, as we say. Of course, if we don't have these, if I don't do this kind of stuff, there's no way to pull this stuff out of thin air. Now, I didn't bring down any rear elevations, but I will show you in a concrete fashion. This is one of the most common units of scenery that has been used for the last 400 years, and it is what is called a flat. Now, what in the heck is a flat? That's what we build the walls out of. Now, this one's a narrow one. There's some narrow sections in the walls of that set. This one is beat up. I just yanked it out of storage this morning for the illustration point at this juncture. But it has had some painting work done on it at some point to simulate wallpaper, like what's been done to that set. But here's the interesting part about this thing. If you turn it around to the back, what you'll notice is that it is just a simple wooden frame. And it's almost akin to an artist's canvas that you would see a painter paint a landscape or a portrait on. This thing is incredibly lightweight, which what scenery needs to be. It needs to be lightweight and portable because you're moving it. But all it is a very simple wooden frame. And it's built out of what we call 1x3 lumber, meaning 1 inch thick, 3 inches wide. Not that you need to know that. But it's a very simple item in terms of set construction. This is what the carpenters in the shop need the rear elevations for, as that bottom drawing shows you on that handout, to know each section of the wall and how big and how tall and how wide and so on and so forth to fabricate all of these. And in that set, there are multiple of these, some of them up to 4 or 5 feet wide, that have been then joined together to create the illusion of the interior of this set. In this case, the funny part about this is that part. That frame, that flat frame, has been covered with a cotton material known as muslin. M-U-S-L-I-N. It's a cotton fabric. And it has been stretched and glued to that frame. And then once we get it wet with water-phase paint, what cotton always does when it gets wet, it shrinks. And then it gives a nice drum head-like surface on it to create the illusion of a solid wall. Well, that's all scenery is. It's an illusion. And even back when you were backstage the other day, you got a little bit of a glimpse at the illusion. Scenery only has to be completed on one side, because that's all the audience is going to see. Anyway, to get back to where I was headed, what I want to conclude scenery with and scenic design with is what I call the basic functions of scenery, how it serves a play. We talked about spectacle in regards to the elements that a playwright has at their disposal according to Aristotle. I talked about the fact that scenery, lighting, costumes are not there and should not be there simply to call attention to themselves. They're there to serve the play and to help the actor in the communication of the playwright's intent. So this leads me to my first point in terms of the basic functions of scenery. It's there to aid the actor. It's there to aid the actor. And it's there to aid the actor in the manner in which I just described, to help them in the communication of the playwright's intent. What is it the playwright is trying to communicate? What I'm doing as a scenic designer is providing the appropriate environment for the action of the play. That's what a scenic designer does. They provide the appropriate environment for the action of the play. They're creating the world of the play. They're there to serve the actor. A second point, that scenery is there to establish when and where. The time period. When does the action of the play take place? Where does it take place? Establishes when and where. Third, scenery should help establish mood and atmosphere. Mood and atmosphere. Now, what in the world does that mean? What I'm referring to here is the psychological tone of the play. Psychological tone of the play. And most often this is done through color. It's done through color. Anybody in here been in a hospital? I don't mean as a patient, but at least been in a hospital? Pretty much all of us. What are the colors of the walls in a hospital? Generally speaking, what kind of colors do you see in a hospital? Pardon me? Light colors, subdued colors, pastel colors. You don't see fire engine red or screaming yellow or orange. Why? Pardon me? Subdue the patients and subdue the visitors. If you're going to the hospital, there's a pretty serious reason why you're there. And what they're attempting to do is to create a subdued mood and atmosphere. Same reason if you go into a federal penitentiary, the walls aren't painted some screaming primary color, because we associate colors with certain moods. You have a different mood when you think about the colors of Halloween. You have a different mood when you think of the colors of Christmas or of Valentine's. You come up with a different mood on the 4th of July with red, white, and blue. So we're establishing mood and atmosphere. All right, this thing up here is kind of a romantic comedy. And it's all about women. 6 of them that are all crazy, in my opinion. But the color is there for a particular reason. It also helps establish when and where. But the point here is that it should help establish mood and atmosphere. There is an old cliche in the scenic design world where you use bright and cheery colors for comedies and dark and dreary colors for tragedies. And most often that cliche holds true. 4th, should serve as an element of decoration. Scenery serves as an element of decoration. Now, what does that mean? Talking about interior decoration. Interior decoration communicates information about the people who inhabit the location. Now, with this thing behind me, we don't have the real furniture just yet. We have not even really started on the set decoration, though I've done a couple of things. Some wall light fixtures in one picture so far. I got 4 or 5 more to hang, and so on and so forth. But the point is this play that you're going to be seeing next week revolves around several women who, in their senior year of high school, made an agreement amongst each other that they would all be in each other's weddings as bridesmaids. Unfortunately, some of them are now on their 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th and 7th husband. And the play takes place over a period of many years as they get married and they get divorced, but eventually there'll be tables up there with linen tablecloths and champagne buckets and champagne flutes, and all of that set decoration is going to communicate information about the content of the play. So it should serve as an element of decoration. Finally, and a kind of a very practical one, it should conceal distractions. It should conceal or hide distractions. Now, what does that mean? Can you see anything backstage that would be distracting to you? Now you're going to say, well, there's these big old cables hanging down. Those things are going to get pulled out of sight once I get done fooling with the lighting for this play. So those big loop-de-loop power cables up there, they'll go away. But even as the set sits there now, it has defined and refined the stage itself. It has established what part of the stage we're using for the action of the play. It is concealing all of the distractions of what goes on backstage. You can't see any of that stuff. It is concealing distractions. It's that simple. But those are the 5 basic functions of stage scenery in its most elemental form. Any questions about scenic design? Any questions about that? Well, if I can find the page. There we go. All right, let's flip over to chapter 11, page 241. Chapter 11, page 241. Before I leave scenic design, I checked the box office. Oh, come on, people. Do what you need to do and order your tickets. Only a handful of you have done this so far, and the box office has been open for 2 days. I assure you, you don't want to get squeezed out from procrastination. I gave you a lot of advance warning.
Where's the location for it? Where do we call?
This week, you simply make the telephone reservation. It is next week that you are then able to come pick up the tickets that you have ordered. And the box office next week, come by and pick up the tickets, will be just outside of this main entrance to the theater. But the phone number you need to call to make the reservations is 661-1365. Or add 843 on the front end of it. All right, let's move on to lighting design. What is the purpose of lighting? To see the actors. Okay, I get it. Scenery and costumes have been a part of theater since its inception with the ancient Greeks. Lighting is a relatively new aspect of theater, or a relatively new element of the visual art of theater. And the reason I'm saying this is this. Going all the way back to the earliest days of formal theater, 3rd century, 2nd century BC, the plays took place out of doors in arenas. The only lighting source was the sun. You can't control that. With what we are talking about in terms of lighting design is controllable light. However, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans were at least smarter than some of the people who build outdoor arenas today. Have any of you been to see a football game at Williams-Brice Stadium or that cow pasture up in Clemson? Has anybody ever been to a football game there? Only 1 or 2 of you? Have you ever sat in a football stadium at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you wished you were on the other side? You know what I'm talking about? You're being blinded by the sun. In the early part of the season, you are baking. I can remember back when I could afford to go to the Darlington Raceway, which I did twice a year for a long time. That Labor Day weekend race back in the 90s, oh my God, I'd have paid $1,000 for just 1 cup of ice to put on my head that I was being fried by the sun being right there and coming in here. At least the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks were smart enough to put the stage here and the seats here so the sun was behind the audience, shining on the stage and not blinding the audience. That was the only thing you could control then. Now again, because of the fact that we need the ability to control light in theater, lighting did not really become an issue in theater until the early 1400s, when theater began to move indoors. And it was not until the 1400s that we began to see plays inside of a building. As I've mentioned before, the first proscenium theater did not really emerge until the early 1600s in Italy. And it wasn't until theater moved indoors that the need for some kind of artificial lighting became a problem and became a reality. We need some kind of artificial lighting. I asked a question when I first started talking about the physical theater, that anybody was aware of the fact that we've got one of the oldest standing theaters in this state in terms of early American theaters being built in the late 1600s or the 1700s. And yes, we do. It's the Dock Street Theater in Charleston. But again, why have all the other ones disappeared? It's not that they were torn down, it's that they burned down. Because the earliest forms of illumination for the stage was flame. We started off with using candelabras with whale oil and a floating wick to generate some lighting. Chandeliers with candles or oil lamps suspended above the stage. You've all seen Western movies from the 1800s, the 1870s, 80s. You would see a scene in a saloon with a stage and the dance hall girls dancing around, and you would see across the front of the stage what we call hurricane lamps with oil and flame. And of course, these things get knocked over. Rowdy cowboys, drunk cowboys, they burn the places to the ground. It was not until the 1880s when Thomas Edison finally invented electricity that we really see theatrical lighting coming into its own. And it really was not until the early part of the 1900s when electricity and the distribution thereof really jump-started theatrical lighting. This is why I can say that it's the most recent element of the visual elements of theater to come to the forefront. And of course, by the time we get into the early part of the 1900s, we began to see actual lighting fixtures designed specifically for lighting theatrical productions being manufactured. Another major explosion in the world of theatrical lighting occurred in the early 1980s. And that is when we first began to see the application of the computer. Looking back in 2017, I don't have a clue how I used to light shows back in the mid-70s when I first started in this business. Oh my God, I'd kill somebody if they messed with my lighting computer. And of course, computerization just revolutionized the whole industry. The funny part about theatrical lighting, it is one of the most artistic tools that we have, again, in terms of the visual elements of production. It's one of the most artistic tools we've got. Shafts of light, shafts of colored light, washes of colored light, moving lights, all of that stuff that has come to the world of theatrical lighting. It's incredible the visual impact that lighting can have on music productions, theater productions, and the like. But I also have to tell you that theatrical lighting is the most mathematical element of theatrical production. Not that I'm going to get involved in it, take my class in lighting design, but theatrical lighting is based on the Pythagorean theorem. And if you can't deal with the Pythagorean theorem, you can't do lighting. What is the Pythagorean theorem? A squared plus B squared equals C squared. It's that simple. And if you can't deal with that mathematical equation, even with a calculator, forget the world of theatrical lighting. It's something unto itself. It can also be rather shocking. Okay, I'll leave that one alone. Trust me, I've been fried a few times. You start working with a touring production and you're wiring in something of 400 amps and you touch the wrong thing at the wrong time, you're going to scrape yourself off the wall somewhere. I've done it a few times in the last 40 years. Anyway, it's also one of the most mathematical. Where I want to start here is with what the author says to us on page 241 at the outset of this, chapter 11. We're not going to talk about the sound component in this chapter, just purely the lighting. But the author says to us initially in this chapter, like scenery, costumes, and other elements of theater, stage lighting and sound have counterparts in everyday life. For example, in real life, the basic function of lighting is, of course, illumination, to allow us to see at night and indoors. But there are also many theatrical uses of light in daily life. Advertising signs often have neon lights or brightly colored bulbs. Restaurants feature soft lights and candles and background music to help establish mood and atmosphere. We've talked about these terms already this morning. With the explosion of such handheld devices as MP3 players, smartphones, all of us carry around our own soundtracks every day. In our homes, we put spotlights on special parts of a room, such as a dining room table. Also in our homes, we frequently use a rheostat so that we can dim lights to create mood. Yes, one of the major functions of theatrical lighting is establishing mood and atmosphere. But the author throws a term at us right here at the outset. Does anybody know what a rheostat is? Does this sign language mean something? What she's talking about is, and I have one in my home, in my formal dining room rather, I have a rather large table for large gatherings that in my house we use twice a year, on Thanksgiving Day and on Christmas Day. Other than that, that's just where I pile up stuff. But hanging over that formal dining room table is a chandelier. And on the wall, instead of having just an on-off switch, there's a little round knob that you can turn and you can make that chandelier very bright or make it very dim, depending upon the mood and atmosphere of the dinner. Now, if I hadn't been married for 36 years, I'm sure at some point, my wife and I would have a, nice romantic dinner, and I'm not going to turn the thing on at full intensity. I'm going to dim it down so that we have a nice romantic atmosphere. We're doing the same thing in theater. What that rheostat is, it's a mechanical device that restricts the flow of electricity to that chandelier, which makes the bulbs in it either burn brightly or burn dimly. Now, what I have up in that control booth is a console that's 42 inches long and about this wide, that instead of having one of those little knobs on it, it has 324. And I can communicate to those controllers via the internal computer in it, which then is making lights hanging above my head or above that set do different things at different moments. It gives us control over the lighting. So we can do things like establishing mood and atmosphere. And again, it says what home doesn't have projected images available through flat screen HD television, and now even the ability to change digital images in a frame. Lighting was historically the last element of visual design to be incorporated into theater production, and ironically is perhaps the most advanced in terms of equipment, technology, and techniques. Much of the advances have occurred in the last 100 years, but before we look at theater lighting today, it will be helpful to have a short historical view of its development, which I've already done. But the point here is think about, again, all of the theatrical uses of lighting in our daily lives. Back when I was 19, 20, 21 years old, and I would take a young lady out to dinner, better than McDonald's, you know, I would suggest once we had finished eating that we go back to my apartment. Now, when I went back to my apartment, if she was stupid enough to go, and on occasion was, I didn't walk into my apartment and turn on my porch light, my kitchen light, my den light, my bedroom lights, the bathroom light, and open the refrigerator so that that light was on. I'd taken that bulb, that 100-watt bulb out of the lamp and put in a 25-watt bulb, and that was the only thing I turned on. Why? I was trying to create a mood for romance, which all of y'all are sitting up there going, oh my God, how scurvy old man is he? I'm old now. I used to be rather svelte. But the point here is that those theatrical uses still exist in the real world. We're taking from the real world and applying it on stage, if you will. So where I want to go next then is, like I talked about the basic functions of scenery, I want to talk about here for a moment the basic functions of lighting before we get into some of the brass tacks of all of this. Basic functions of stage lighting. There's only 3 of these. The first and most important function of lighting, and it's a relatively lengthy statement, but it goes this way: focus of attention through selective illumination. Now, illumination is spelled with an I. It's not like aluminum, spelled with an A, spelled with an I. Illumination. Focus of attention through selective illumination. Focus of attention through selective illumination. Lighting is helping the director. When that director is establishing their blocking, they are moving those actors about the stage, as I've said before, in a strategic manner, so that you, the audience, will know where to look. See, the difference between theater and television and film. Television and film, the camera dictates what you see. You can only see what the camera allows you to see. I mentioned going to see a football game. When I'm sitting in a football stadium, I'm dictating where I look. And I cannot tell you how many times I've been watching a sporting event on television, even in the last week or two with the basketball championships on, or watching football, or even stock car racing, You know, all of a sudden there's something going on over here, but the camera's showing me what's going over here. I want to see this. The camera dictates what you see. Well, how do we establish focus? Okay, audience, we want you to look here. That set that's sitting behind me is 36 feet wide. How are we going to be able to tell you, the audience, where it is we want you to focus your attention? Through selective illumination. Changes in the intensity of lighting in terms of how bright it is, how dim it is. You're going to see this illustrated next week. But it helps establish focus of attention through selective illumination. I am only going to allow you to see what I want you to see as a lighting designer. And I'm going to be working with the director symbolically here in terms of assisting the director in terms of creating where that focus is. It's that simple. If you've been to see any kind of a music concert going all the way back to what we used to call arena rock in the 70s when bands were playing huge football stadiums, you would see the utilization of what is called a follow spot. A follow spot is a lighting fixture that looks like literally a cannon sitting on top of a pedestal that projects this incredibly bright beam of light that cuts through all of the colored lights and smoke and fog and all the rest of it to say, boom, this is the lead singer, this is the person we want you focusing on most importantly. Same thing I'm talking about here, focus of attention through selective illumination. What you've also got to further understand in terms of the technology of all of this is we, lighting designers, are taking advantage of the physiology of the eyeball, the physiology of the eye. Now, as I scan you folks this morning, and I look at you as my field of vision right here, the people that I see are these two that are wearing white t-shirts. Why? Because white reflects light. It makes them the brightest two people in this classroom. What I'm talking about in terms of the physiology of the eye is naturally drawn to the brightest object in a field of vision. So as I scan across you people, they're the ones that stand out. We're doing the same thing with lighting in terms of the audience. So focus of attention through selective illumination. First and foremost. A second function of lighting. This is a real crappy phrase, but it's the best one I've come up with. Hopefully you'll understand what I'm driving at. But it's what I call enhancement of beauty. Enhancement. E-N-H-A-N-C-E-M-E-N-T. Enhancement of beauty. Most of you probably went sometime before your senior year of high school to some kind of photography studio to have your senior picture made, right? I hated it. Always felt pretty stupid about the whole thing. But nonetheless, that photographer manipulated the lighting so that you would look a whole lot better than you probably do anyway. This is what I'm talking about, especially in television and film. We can make aging actors look really good by the placement of the lights, how bright the lights are, the color of the lights, enhancement of beauty. To further illustrate this point, have any of you been to Washington, D.C. and toured all of our national monuments? The Lincoln Memorial, Washington monument. Some of you've done this. One of my favorite ones is one that's actually just outside of DC near Arlington. And it's a bronze statue that is really huge. But it memorializes those soldiers raising a flag on the top of Iwo Jima during World War II. If you go by there during the daytime and you kind of look at it under just the sunlight, you sit there and you kind of go, okay, let's move on. Go back at night and look at it. The way the spotlights strike that thing. It looks like it's alive and that those are real people. You can see the veins in the back of their hands and up their arms as they strain to raise that steel pipe with that flag on it. You see beads of sweat on their face, and it's like, jeez! The Washington Monument, what is it? It's a concrete block post painted white. You go back and you look at it at night. How the light striking that object utterly change its appearance. This is what I'm talking about in terms of enhancement of beauty. And, for years when I was younger, 5, 6, 7 years old, when my parents and the rest of my family would go on vacation and we would go to our beach destination. Back in those days, the only place my father wanted to go was Daytona Beach, Florida. Okay, by God, we're going. We'd arrive in town at 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, start driving up and down the beach road looking for a motel. Where I wanted to stay and where my brothers wanted to stay was the one that had the colored floodlights and the palm trees. You ever wonder why when you go to some place like Myrtle Beach, everybody's got colored floodlights shining in a palm tree? Why do they do that? Never even thought of it? It's called critical thinking here. To draw attention. Make the place look better. Same thing I'm talking about here. Enhancement of beauty. Changing the appearance of things. Revealing the appearance of things. The third one of these is one I've already used this morning in regards to scenery. And again, it's establishing mood and atmosphere. Establishing mood and atmosphere. It's a funny looking name, a word. But again, we establish mood and atmosphere, the psychological tone of the play, two ways. One, with intensity. And what I mean by intensity is how bright the light is or how dim the light is. The intensity variations. The second way we can establish mood and atmosphere is through color. Through color. What I've got in my hand here is a sample book of a material that is called gel. This is one particular manufacturer that I use quite a bit. But what gel is, it's the color filters that we place in front of a lighting fixture to be able to change the light from white to a different color. And in this particular sample book, as you can see, there are literally hundreds of variations of all of the colors that you could possibly think of in the rainbow in terms of being able to tint light in a particular direction of color. And I'm talking about all of them. There's literally just hundreds of choices that I have in terms of being able to establish the mood and atmosphere, or the appropriate mood and atmosphere of a particular play. And there's a long story behind how it got to be known as gel. But gel is, again, the color media or the color filters that we use to tint light. But again, that is there to help and assist in terms of establishing mood and atmosphere. It also goes back to enhancement of beauty in terms of being able to tint the light to make actors, make their faces look better under stage lights and so forth. And of course, we can create special effects with that particular technique of using colored filters or the so-called gels to be able to tint the light. Any questions about what I've talked about so far this morning? Actually, I'm at a pretty good stopping point for where I'll pick up on Friday. Order your tickets, folks.